Tonight, breaking news. Former President Trump says he could be indicted again, this time by the federal grand jury investigating attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election and the January 6th riot. The former president says he received a target letter from special counsel Jack Smith, lashing out at Smith and calling him deranged. While in Michigan, the first charges of their kind, 16 people, so-called false electors, indicted, accused of scheming to overturn the election results. Also tonight, the dramatic incident at the Korean demilitarized zone. A U.S. soldier bolting from a tour group and running into North Korea. He's detained tonight. Why did he do it? Endless severe weather, the dust storm in the middle of a brutal heat wave. Phoenix at 110 or hotter for 19 days, smashing an almost 50-year-old record. We go inside the high-tech lab tracking mosquitoes and malaria inside the U.S. as a new case is reported in Florida. Our look at the world's leader in electric vehicles. Why China could lead the electric car race.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. All signs tonight pointing to the growing possibility former President Donald Trump could soon face another federal criminal indictment. This one related to the unlawful interference with the transfer of power following Mr. Trump's 2020 election defeat. It was Donald Trump himself who broke the news earlier, saying he had received a letter from special counsel Jack Smith, notifying him he was a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation. In fact, Smith's focus goes far beyond the attack on the Capitol. Mr. Trump describing the letter as horrifying news for our country and putting it in the category of witch hunt. He has long accused his adversaries of waging against him. The ex-president already stands indicted in the unrelated federal classified documents case, the New York State charges related to alleged hush money payments. He is also under investigation for possible election interference in Georgia. And now, as we've learned today, a target in the special counsel's federal investigation into election interference. Garrett Hake leads off our coverage.
Donald Trump tonight is the target of another federal criminal investigation, this time into his efforts to hold on to power after losing the 2020 presidential election. The former president revealing the target letter on social media, calling the special counsel leading the probe, quote, deranged Jack Smith, adding his attorneys received a letter Sunday night, giving him 4 days to come to Washington and tell grand jurors his side of the story. Communication which Mr. Trump writes, quote, almost always means an arrest and indictment. The former president on the campaign trail tonight in Iowa.
If you say something about an election, they want to put you in jail for the rest of your life. It's a disgrace.
The special counsel's investigation covers any unlawful interference into the transfer of power in 2020, including the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, for which Mr. Trump has already been impeached but not convicted, as well as efforts to send fake Trump electors to Washington. Michigan's Attorney General today announcing charges against 16 such electors from that state on election law and forgery felonies.
This plan to reject the will of the voters and undermine democracy was fraudulent and legally baseless.
Allies of the GOP presidential frontrunner springing to his defense as news of the target letter broke today.
So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their number one opponent. It's time and time again.
While his campaign rivals offered careful critiques, wary of angering the Trump supporters they hope to win over.
The rest of this primary election is going to be, in reference to Trump, is going to be about lawsuits. It's going to be about legal fees. It's going to be about judges.
I think it was shown how he was in the White House and didn't do anything while things were going on. He should have come out more forcefully.
What specific charges Mr. Trump may face next are unknown and would come on top of criminal charges he already faces in Manhattan related to alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and federal charges in Florida over his handling of classified documents. All while a grand jury in Georgia prepares to hear evidence of 2020 election interference there, which could lead to additional charges.
So, Garrett, a lot of moving parts here. Mr. Trump's attorneys were just in court today regarding the classified document case.
That's right, Lester. And those attorneys told the judge there that a December trial date would be too soon. They say they need more time to review the evidence against their client. And they argued that the possibility he could face additional election-related charges from the special counsel could slow things down still further. The judge there says she'll rule soon. Lester?
Garrett Hake starting us off. Thanks. Senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett joins me. Laura, does a target letter come and is quickly followed typically by an indictment?
Lester, it substantially raises the likelihood of prosecutors seeking an eventual indictment. That's virtually certain now. Before today, we knew they were interested in Mr. Trump's efforts to stay in office, but formally notifying his lawyers that the former president is actually a target means they have reason to believe that the former president committed a crime.
So what crimes might they be looking at? Do we get any clues today from this letter?
Well, we know various witnesses have been asked about all the ways in which Mr. Trump and others tried to block or delay the certification of the election on January 6th. He says he had every right to contest those election results, but until we see an actual indictment returned from a grand jury, it remains to be seen what specific crimes prosecutors are going to allege.
How does this work? What happens next in all this?
And that's a great question. So this week, we will look to see if other witnesses go before that grand jury in Washington, D.C., and then at some point, the special counsel will ask the grand jury to indict. And if they agree to, Mr. Trump's attorneys will then be notified. He needs to turn himself in. And if all of this sounds very familiar, that's because it is. It's the same process that we saw just last month. In the first part of the special counsel investigation, the one into the classified documents, his attorneys were informed that he was a target of that investigation. And then just weeks later, he was indicted in that case.
All right, well, thanks for following it all, Laura Jarrett. Appreciate it. Also developing late today, the U.S. Army confirming the identity of the American soldier who ran across the demilitarized zone and into North Korea. Keir Simmons has late details about what we're learning and what led up to his detention.
Tonight, the Army confirming American soldier Travis King is detained in North Korea after bolting across the border and effectively handing himself over to the regime run by Kim Jong-un. Washington racing to signal he was acting alone.
One of our service members who was on a tour willfully and without authorization crossed the military demarcation line.
Two U.S. officials telling NBC News he'd faced disciplinary action in South Korea and was supposed to be leaving the country. Another official said military police escorted him as far as they could go, an airport checkpoint. He then tagged along a commercial tour to the demilitarized zone and made the dangerous crossing.
He'll certainly be detained in that area initially and then probably taken to an interrogation facility.
We were in North Korea at the DMZ in 2017, seeing for ourselves the tense, militarized border.
And we're not allowed to stay here for very long.
A U.S. official tells NBC News escorts from the tour tried to chase the soldier but didn't catch him. In 2017, a North Korean soldier was shot multiple times as he dashed across the line to defect to the south. He had to be dragged in darkness to safety. That same year, U.S. hostage Otto Warmbier was released after 18 months detention. He was in a vegetative state and died soon afterwards, escalating tensions between the U.S. and North Korea. The two countries have been growing further apart, with Kim Jong-un testing ballistic missiles, one fired just tonight. Today's events risking adding to the diplomatic challenges at a difficult time.
And Keir joining me now in the studio. We've learned a bit more about the soldier's background. What can you tell us?
Leslie, just in the last few minutes, a U.S. official telling us that he is 23 years old, that he was supposed to return to Fort Bliss in Texas, that he's served in the Army for 2.5 years. But as to what he was doing and what he was thinking, that's still a mystery tonight.
Yeah, I mean, history suggests it'll be a delicate dance moving forward. What do we know about what happens next in terms of trying to get him back?
That's absolutely right. U.S.-North Korean relations have been in the deep freeze for the past few years. Now, around 20 U.S. citizens have actually been detained in North Korea since the mid-90s. But I think the challenge now is, how do you even get talks started? And remember the deep distrust between the two sides. How do you overcome that? What I think we've seen Washington doing today is to signal that Private King was acting on his own initiative, that it wasn't directed from Washington. One of the questions tonight, I think, is, do the North Koreans believe that?
All right, Keir Simmons, good to have you here tonight. Thank you. Much of the country is still struggling this evening with unbearable heat. The records keep falling with no sign of relief anytime soon. No one knows that better than in the city of Phoenix, where we find Erin McLaughlin tonight.
In Phoenix, a dust storm engulfing the city, ushering in the 19th consecutive day of 110-plus temps, shattering a nearly 50-year-old record. Never in the city's history has it been this hot for this long.
This kind of heat is like suffocating.
Even tourists from very hot southern Spain are overwhelmed by Arizona's heat.
Way hotter than Andalusia.
Arizona is not the only state setting new highs. More than 24 extreme heat records were either set or tied yesterday. And tonight, 63 million Americans are living under blistering heat threats from Southern California to Miami. Parts of Texas hitting 33 consecutive days of triple digits. Austin EMS overwhelmed with calls for help.
The majority of our patients that are coming in for heat-related issues are younger males between like 18 and 50.
And it's not just soaring temperatures, thick smoke sweeping the East Coast. Tonight, nearly 70 million Americans under air quality alerts, fueled by the Canadian wildfires, now burning for weeks. The climate crisis, experts say, makes this dangerous heat wave 3 to 5 times more likely. Back in Phoenix, even the cactuses, symbols of desert survival, are suffering.
So this plant is probably 40 to 50 years old, and this is clearly a plant that is under stress. If it continues, I think the chances of survival are going to go down dramatically.
Scientists at the Desert Botanical Garden say this is a warning for us all.
If cactus have a hard time surviving here, no doubt humans are going to have a hard time adjusting for these kinds of conditions.
This is the veritable canary in a coal mine, or cactus in a coal mine.
I would say this should be a wake-up call.
Aaron, folks there, of course, know all about hot weather, but what are they saying in Phoenix about this level of heat for so long?
Well, Lester, some here are simply shrugging this off. They say they don't think this is a big deal. But then there are those who say they are extremely concerned, pointing to the fact that we don't know how long this heat wave will last. And it's not just playing out here at home. This is also happening overseas in the Middle East and Europe. Tonight, people around the world are wondering what their quality of life will be like going forward. Lester?
Aaron, thank you. In just 60 seconds, our exclusive look at how the CDC is studying the mosquitoes transmitting the first local cases of malaria in decades. Plus later, our inside look at China's race to be the world's leader in electronic vehicles, why you may not be able to get them inside the U.S. anytime soon. We're back with an NBC News exclusive with news today about another case of locally transmitted malaria here in the U.S., bringing the total number of recent cases to 8. Tonight, our Blaine Alexander takes us inside the CDC's battle against the disease.
We're walking into inside the insectary at the Centers for Disease Control.
We have the eggs, we have the larvae, and then we have the adult mosquitoes.
Dr. Monica Paris leads the CDC's 2023 malaria response team, started in response to locally transmitted cases recently discovered in the U.S., 1 in Texas, 7 in Sarasota County, Florida, including a new one announced just today.
We notified all the public that live in that immediate area.
But how closely is the CDC watching?
Very closely, very closely.
The cases are locally born, meaning those who are infected have not recently traveled overseas and contracted malaria here at home, something the U.S. has not seen in 2 decades.
Why are we seeing these cases now?
It's a good question, and we don't have a good answer for absolutely why didn't we see it in 20 years and it came up now.
That's part of the work being done here.
This is Anopheles quadrimaculatus, and this one was found in Texas.
Only one kind of mosquito can transmit malaria. Here, experts are looking at things like mosquito behavior and how they respond to insecticide. It's one of the labs that helped fight the Zika and West Nile outbreaks. Now, the CDC, which was founded in 1946 specifically to fight malaria, is working closely with local health departments where the latest cases have been found.
They process the mosquitoes, examine them, process them, and then they're sending them here for us to do the test for the parasite in the mosquito.
She and most experts agree. During the summer outdoor months, insect repellent is a must. But she says the chance of a national outbreak, thankfully, is very low.
And because of the history that we've had, the outbreaks that we have had have been relatively small and contained, as are these.
Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Atlanta.
Up next here tonight, the great electric car race inside China's battle for dominance over the future of the road. Now to our series, The Future of the Road. And it may surprise you to learn when it comes to electric vehicles, the biggest challenger to U.S. automakers isn't Japan or Germany, but China. Janice Mackey-Freyer reports.
In the world's largest market for electric vehicles, this is a glimpse at the future. At Shanghai's International Auto Show this year, the heavyweights aren't GM or Ford.
It's massive improvement in terms of the user experience.
They're Chinese brands like BYD, Li Auto, Xpeng, and Zeekr, making sleek-looking cars that are high-tech and affordable.
When you drive a Chinese vehicle today, it's far different than 10 years ago. They are better built, and the quality overall is much more competitive with what you would see from a U.S. automaker or from a European brand.
Foreign automakers, including American brands, are now paying attention to Chinese players like BYD. It's #1 in China. And the competition is now so intense, it sparked an EV price war here.
NIO cut its prices by nearly 10% on all models. Competition is fierce, says CEO William Li. You can be ahead today, but not in a few months. The boom in electric vehicles is why China is now the largest auto exporter in the world, tripling in just 5 years to overtake Japan. That's thanks largely to sales in Europe, as most major Chinese brands aren't yet available in the U.S. due to tariffs put in place during the Trump administration.
Any vehicle built in China and exported to the United States comes with a 25% tax on it. That just makes those vehicles far more expensive, and it's hard for them to be competitive here in the U.S.
China's growth in EVs is what some experts call a Chinese storm in the global industry.
It's surprising that what we felt is coming is actually really coming, and it's true.
China leads the EV race in part because it controls the supply chain of raw materials for batteries. 28% of the world's lithium, 41% of cobalt, through stakes in mines on 5 continents. China also dominates processing for battery components.
Then release the brake,
Yes.
and it just takes over.
Government subsidies keep the industry charged too. And China is now also restricting exports of some key metals in an escalating tech war with the U.S. Right now, Chinese EV companies are scaling up and going global. The challenge for automakers everywhere will be keeping up. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Hefei, China.
And that's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thank you for watching. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.